Shall we get started?
Hello, everyone. My name is Sarah Revelo. I work full-time for a local nationwide nonprofit, training current and also new employees. However, my favorite job is being a mom to two amazing boys, as well as my husband. You could count him as a third baby. Um, I picked the La Mesa Farmers Market for my paper. I have a lot of great memories from being in La Mesa, but I didn't know a lot about the market. I used to go almost on a daily basis, every couple of days to La Mesa, but I didn't really know anything about La Mesa's farmers market since it wasn't on the main drag. Um, Go ahead and next slide, please. When I was deciding on where to do my project, I wasn't sure which place to go to. I knew I wanted to do a place that I love to go to. Did I want to do the zoo where I brought my family on every weekend, if not every weekend, at least on a monthly basis, or something like the La Mesa Farmers Market? So back and forth, I ended up picking the La Mesa Farmers Market. Next slide. Almost every Friday for 6 weeks, I dragged my husband and my oldest, and we went to the farmers market. They didn't really seem to mind, as long as we picked up some fun treats from different vendors for research, of course. The first week that I went, I didn't really know what to do, so I went there. I didn't bring a pen, I didn't bring paper, I didn't pull out my cell phone. I just kind of wanted to get a better idea of what was going on, what to kind of expect. I had gone there one time beforehand, but it was probably about 7 or 8 years prior to that. So I wasn't sure really what to expect. The location over the years had changed. So the first week I did not bring anything, and I realized very fast that that was a big mistake. The next time I did go, I did bring my pen, my paper, or at least my phone. I had my phone ready to go with text messages so that I could put in more detailed notes later on. Unfortunately, they don't have a lot of seating spots, so periodically I would buy a little fun treat for myself or my family and sit down on the side of the street on the table and add different notes for later on. I really felt that the field notes, the note taking, that definitely helped really open my eyes to what was going on around me. And it really, beforehand, I always thought that I was very observant with my surroundings, but I feel like the note taking was really eye-opening for me. Go ahead and next slide, please. So again, one of the big things that I was able to always trick my family into going in was the treats. A lot of places, they were more than happy to go ahead and pass out different snacks so that you could possibly buy them, things like that. A lot of the vendors were very open about their products. On the products, they always put in, if it was homemade, they put their certification information on there. It was definitely very interesting on the information that when you talk with them that they provided. Go ahead, next slide, please. So on the many trips to the market, I talked with lots of different vendors. One of the vendors that I talked with was Becca, that's the person on the picture, from Spooky House Bakery. So she started doing the farmers market during COVID, and she really opened up about how much things have changed. A lot of people, I didn't realize that that's quite a bit of how they get their income is doing the farmers market, and how much COVID really did put that, cause them to go kind of in the negative, go backwards because of the loss of income. So there's a lot of people that are still trying to catch up from COVID. But a lot of the vendors were very open. I didn't realize that the vendors don't typically just do one farmers market. A lot of times they do multiple farmers market. A lot of them seem their ultimate goal is the Hillcrest Farmers Market. That one actually has a 2-year waiting list to even get into it. So I was definitely surprised at that. But everyone at the farmers market was very open. They have long, like die-hard fans of different vendors. And if you go over there just looking around, someone will most likely be on the side of your shoulder telling you what you should check out and what you need to buy. Not what you should buy, but what you need to buy. One of the trips also, I was very surprised. There was a bachelorette party that I was not expecting at the farmer's market, but I was able to go ahead and also speak with not just the vendors, but actually one of the girls in the bridal showers. So it was definitely a big surprise, but it was exciting to see something completely abnormal for the farmer's market. Next slide. So with the farmers market, they do try to do a little thing for the different holidays. The Friday before Easter, they had an Easter egg hunt for the kids where they would hide eggs all over, and then you would try to find the eggs and bring them over to the vendor that has a business card inside. So they try to do fun things for the kids for Easter. For Mother's Day, they did more so fun little tablecloths, trying to make it more for the mothers, but they do try to do some things for the holidays. But it was fun seeing the kids running around. I found an egg, I found an egg. Next slide. So during my research, I went to 3 different farmers markets. I wanted to get a feel for how all of them are, just because each of them could be different. I went to the Hillcrest Farmers Market, which was probably 3 times the La Mesa Farmers Market. The Santee Farmers Market, which seemed more like a crafts fair than a farmers market. There was only one fruits and vegetables stand, but it is definitely something where each farmers market is different. Just because you go to one, you should always check out multiple. Although I do love La Mesa, they have great restaurants right there where you can go shopping and then go grab a bite to eat with some friends. Next slide, please. A couple recommendations that I had when I first was starting to write this paper. I kind of panicked a little bit because I tried finding a lot of research on La Mesa's farmers market, and I really did struggle with that. So if I did have some recommendations, I would definitely recommend for La Mesa to build more of a website about the farmers market. They do have an information booth at the farmers market, but they don't really have any pamphlets. They recommend for you to go on the website. The website doesn't have a lot of information besides how to become a vendor. You can be added to their monthly list to get newsletters, but I signed up a couple weeks ago and I still haven't received anything. So I think that their website could use a lot of work. I also, recommend, one of the big things that I saw with the farmers market is they've moved over the years multiple times because of trying to deal with construction, trying to deal with bigger spaces. And this most recent thing, they moved it back to downtown La Mesa, but it's caused a lot of issues for the local restaurants. Local restaurants are losing out possible business because a parking space is being used. So I think maybe having a booth here and there for the restaurants, maybe being able to sample out appetizers, maybe enticing them to come in and visit, have a dinner, have drinks, have whatnot with their friends, and just have that taste to be able to entice them. Also more vendors. I think that they could definitely use more vendors. They did have some, but they were the same ones. It would be nice to see some new ones coming in throughout the time frame. A lot of times you're going to see families there, and there was not a lot of kid activities for the kids to go out and do. And I feel that that would be great if they had more things like the Easter egg hunt. Obviously not just Easter eggs for throughout the year, but find different ways to get the kids involved as well so that they're excited about there. I don't know about you, but I love hearing music as I'm shopping. Maybe that's a grocery thing, I don't know, but I love hearing music. I think that it would be great if there was a band playing or some kind of music in the background. The farmers market is very, shop local, support local. So why not add a local band to help entertain while you're shopping? Next slide. So overall, I think the La Mesa Farmers Market, it's a great place to get fresh fruits and vegetables. It could be a fun excuse to go to the market instead of big stores. You might be surprised what else you're going to find at the market. If nothing else, it will be a lot less stressful than going to the market. I don't think that I saw anyone that was rushed. There's different vendors. They had, like I said, diehard customers. They're going to give you recommendations on what you should buy. And they're more than happy to farmers market. Yeah, it's definitely something where the farmers market, they're definitely trying to catch up for lost revenue due to COVID. So definitely shop local. Next slide. So I do feel that that's something that you should check out every Friday, as long as the weather permits it, from 3 to 7, downtown La Mesa. There's local trolley center. There's plenty of parking. Just bring your quarters for the parking permits and come check it out. Last slide. Any questions?
Thank you, Sarah. If anyone has questions, go ahead and put them in the chat. We'll wait till the end, and Sarah will be able to answer them for you. Lawrence Rios, I think you're next.
You good? Can you hear me? All right, perfect. So forgive me, I'm getting a little bit of stage fright all of a sudden, but basically, this is my experience writing the ethnography for the course this year. And ethnography is basically like a research project where you're encouraged to engage with the culture, and you can reflect back on your experiences on how it felt while you were doing whatever the subject you're studying is. At the beginning of this session, I basically knew from the bat that I had an awesome thing. I work as a detention officer in a correctional facility. So I already knew I had a pretty juicy subject to mine. But the issue I ran into is that it's kind of unethical for me to explain my experiences with detainees, because that's private, confidential matter. So I went ahead and I changed my entire topic into how correctional officers interact with each other and what the culture is there. Basically, my methods of getting information was for 3 days, I just wrote down every conversation I had with another one of my coworkers throughout the day. And Ms. Smith can tell you that most of it was just boring. It was basically just telling me like what my post assignment for the day was, how bad overtime was. But every once in a while, something really interesting would show up. Like someone would just randomly open up to me about their mental health issues and stuff like that. And so after you're doing this for 3 days, you start to notice themes that you can pull from. And that's where I kind of base my papers. There was 2 articles during our coursework that really helped me with this. One of them was I don't know what the name of the article was, but it was about the Irish relationships and why the men stay abstinent over there. And I just really liked the way she set up her ethnography. It was like she would kind of pull you in with a juicy anecdote, and then she would write what her experience was and then what the backup information of why this might be. And that was how I set up my paper as well. I'd say like the topic of gossip, and write my experience of what gossip was. And then I would go into a deeper dive using sources and stuff like that to explain what would back up my findings, right? And so when I first did my rough draft, I put all my ideas in, and it was a beautiful think piece of what it was like to be an officer, but that's not an ethnography. So then I sat back and I re-looked at it, and I woke up in the middle of the night and I was like, hold on. This is all my information here is setting up for who's in the in group of being trustworthy and who's in the out group of being trustworthy. And all of a sudden I looked at all my field notes and I rewrote my entire paper within a week. I rewrote my entire paper of the week, and it's so much stronger because I stick to the method. And basically what I found is that in at least the correctional facility that I work at, it's one officer to 120 inmates or detainees, right? So if they wanted to rise up and attack me, they could, right? That's not a question. I can't fight 128 people. But what I do have is backup that'll come. So they'll win the battle, lose the war, essentially, right? But that still puts my life or my well-being at risk. So what I've kind of pulled from was that you need to be able to rely on your backup to come save you, right? And what I was thinking about was my work is so gossipy and everyone has an opinion on everything. And I was like, why is this so strong? Why is gossip so much more prevalent than here than in my old job when I worked at the pharmacy or my job before that where I worked at a hotel? Why is it so strong amongst these predominantly men in this facility? And so what I figured out was that everyone wants to know who they can trust in the background to come. And the gossip was the channel, the unofficial channel this would come through. Um, we have safeguards. So obviously if someone messes up in a really bad way, human resources can fire them and get them out of there. But if it's not something that human resources can get involved with, it's up to the people in the group to decide who they want to hang with and who they don't. I also discovered that there was I mean, mental health in the correctional field across America is very rough. It's something like if you work in corrections for 5 to 6 years, you have a 1 in 5 chance of having PTSD. And so I pulled on a study that showed that people with trauma, like severe trauma, they tend to view the world as in group and out group. And I was like, aha, in group, out group. And so I started trying to figure out all the different ways and the themes where in grouping and out grouping was happening. And I came up with officer solidarity, which comes into the idea of seeming bigger than we are so we can respond to a large population that could outnumber us. Mental health issues, and some other thing. But they all basically follow the same thing, same pattern of in-group versus out-group. And basically, I didn't try and reinvent the wheel. We had plenty of ethnographies to view throughout our semester, and I just followed the process to the T. And the more I followed it, the easier my paper was to write. Another article that we read that really, really helped me was way in the beginning, and it seemed borderline silly at the time. It was called Look at This Fish or something like that. And basically, this professor assigns this guy to write everything he sees about a fish. Everything he sees about a fish. And the next day, he's like, all right, look at it some more. Next day, look at it some more. And the idea is that when you initially look at something, including a surrounding, like being an officer where I'm there 6 days a week, right? You think you're getting all the information in the first time, but it's not until you actually like sit and write and then reflect back on your notes that you start to see all the different connections that aren't initially present at the same time. And so that article really helped me. And like I said, the one about Ireland really, really helped me. At the end of my paper, I wrote about how my work is definitely a white minority and English is barely the dominant language they're spoken. So I did write that, you know, for people who are ESL or speak Spanish or Tagalog, one of the Filipino languages, I can't report on what gossip means to them or how much they are able to relate to their families. I also, you know, I can only report in mixed company or male specific spaces because I can't be around when there's only girls there because then it would be mixed company. So I don't know how gossip works in those circles as well. But through my research, I was realizing that there's a lot of information about police officers and there's a lot of information about first responders, but there's very little about people who work in the Department of Corrections. And so, I mean, if you need another paper to write, there's much more to dive into there. Oh, one more thing was that one of our assignments was to view an ethnography, someone else who had done a famous ethnography. And the one who inspired me was there was a girl who was trying to figure out how people were gendering themselves, like for the people who are lesbian, gay, and transgender, how they view their genders and what kind of information helps them map that. And basically, what I took from it was the important part is that you can't just write a paper like, why are people gay? Because that's like a huge topic that has multifaceted stuff and you'd never get to the bottom of it. So you have to slice it down, slice it down, slice it down. And that's what I kind of did too. I was like, correctional officer culture. And then I sliced it down, sliced it down, sliced it down to, at the end of the day, what my paper's about is, why is gossip so strong? And I believe it's because of people need to know whether you're trustworthy or untrustworthy. And that's what my paper came down to. But it came from a big topic, slice it down, to a very specific topic that you can just mine. I mean, the paper was only 10 pages, so you only had so much you could write, but that was my experience with the ethnography.
Thanks, Lawrence. I believe Jonathan is next. Is that correct?
Yep, I'm ready.
All right.
All right. So for my ethnographic topic, I chose the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu community here in San Diego. The reason I chose that, I started training Jiu-Jitsu about 4.5 years ago. And at one point I was having a conversation with a friend of mine back in Oregon. And for whatever reason, he asked me if I was the only white guy at the place I was training, which to me was a really weird question to be asking. But I'm not the most observant human being to ever exist. And it's not really something I'd ever thought about. And so after he asked the question, I thought about it a little bit, and I realized that I was one of 2 people that was white and male training at this place. And after kind of coming to that realization, I realized how diverse the group actually was. And as we're trying to study diverse groups of people in an ethnographic way, I decided there was no better place for me to insert myself than in the Jiu-Jitsu community. But finding areas that were a little bit more foreign to me. So I didn't want to be doing these studies at classes that I already went to. I wanted to be going to classes that I didn't go to normally, or gyms that I didn't go to normally. Before I go into it though, Jiu-Jitsu, for those of you who don't know, is like wrestling, but with submissions. And usually one person's on their back on the ground and one person's kind of standing up, which sounds uneven, but if you get into it, you kind of understand there's a lot more to it than that. Anyway, so my first place where I did my ethnographic observation was at a children's class. So I went to a local gym's children's class and just kind of watched how the children interacted, how the parents interacted with the children, how they showed up, and everything that kind of went on with the dynamics there. And a lot of the training itself kind of reminded me of like a youth soccer practice, right? Where, you know, some kid's not paying enough attention and now he's got to do burpees or something like that. But what is kind of interesting to me about Jiu-Jitsu is it's really gotten popular in the last like 15 or so years. So in a lot of cases, whereas youth programs have soccer, volleyball, parents will go to these events because they played volleyball or soccer when they were that age. And so the parents have some sort of experience with the sport. And that's not necessarily the case in Jiu-Jitsu, because some of the parents just don't want to do that. It's a lot of really close personal contact. That's not everyone's thing. And I totally understand that. So how did their kids end up here? To me, it was kind of like, I wondered, why did the kids want, if this was the case, it really had to be more the kids' idea than the parents' idea. So I asked around, I talked to some of the parents, and most of it came down to, you know, they knew the instructor at some level, and so they brought their kids along. But there was one specific family where their kids at home wrestled each other all the time and were constantly breaking stuff. So if they could bring them to a class and get them to just get all that energy out there, then they wouldn't have to worry about it at home. But the most unique thing about this children's class was the split of genders. So in most martial arts, at least that I've observed, it's predominantly male. And what this showed to me was that as we kind of move further and further in the 21st century, and we're trying more and more to break down gender identities and kind of what makes a man, and what makes a woman, and kind of trying to break that down, I think it's showing improvement, because the gender gap was more 50-50 for the kids' classes. There was never any ginormous, like there wasn't more men than women or girls than boys at any different point in any of the classes that I got to observe, which was the most unique part of that. The second thing that I went to was an open mat. So an open mat is when any gym can do this. They'll open their gym up usually on the weekend and set a specific time where just anyone can come train. Gyms for like martial arts are very similar to gyms for just regular physical fitness. So if I have a membership at 24 Hour Fitness, that doesn't mean I can go to LA Fitness and work out. So this is kind of like a specific time where anyone from any gym can come and train for free. And the gym I went to specifically was Legion, which is a gym up in Miramar that got opened within the last 2 or 3 years. And the reason I chose that one is it's the biggest open mat in San Diego, hands down. There's easily over 100 people that come through that door every weekend. And for jiu-jitsu, even in San Diego, that's quite a few. And I've been to this open mat before, but it being as big as it is, and San Diego being as a diverse of a community as it is, I knew that it was a great place to observe because there's always going to be new people and there's always going to be new interactions. And what I drew mostly from this observation was just the genuine diversity in the amount of people that come. Right. So completely different ethnic backgrounds. I would not say that there was one ethnic background that significantly had a higher population that was there over another. There was still significantly more men than women, and it is a more adult oriented class. So that was kind of to be expected. But there's more subtle things that you can find here too. And that's kind of like, what kind of gear are they wearing, right? So you wear a uniform sometimes when you're training, and you can tell who's got an expensive uniform, who has not expensive uniform. And I think what's kind of beautiful about the sport is it doesn't really matter how expensive your uniform is or how not expensive your uniform is. You're still gonna be able to train the same way as anyone else. And what that means is it doesn't matter if you're a CEO of a company or if you're a convicted felon, okay? None of that matters outside of the mats or on the mats, right? So as soon as you get on the mats, nothing else matters. And so this extremely diverse group of people get together and to a certain extent try and hurt each other in a socially acceptable way. And it's a very happy environment, which I think is very odd, right? Considering that they're genuinely trying to hurt each other on some level. But it is extremely unique. And I think, again, just kind of like I said, the biggest takeaway there was, the difference in the ethnicities that showed up. In some cases, they didn't even speak English, right? So you had people who were trying to hurt each other physically on a Sunday morning, and they couldn't even speak the same language, but it was a happy environment. This was a very good vibes kind of area to be training and doing things. The third place that I went was a seminar. So the seminar was taught by a guy named Tynan Dalpro, who's a world champion, very famous in the jiu-jitsu community. And the seminars in jiu-jitsu are very different than like a regular academic seminar, right? So if I go to a seminar about astronomy, I know a little bit about astronomy, but not a lot about astronomy. So I might be able to get something from the seminar, but I'm not going to maybe get as much as someone who has like a PhD in astronomy is going to gather from it. And furthermore, the observations and whatever conclusions as they come to while they're giving their seminar, they're things that not anyone can necessarily do without the specific equipment or specific knowledge of the subject material. Jiu-jitsu is very different in that really all you need is like your body and to be in the same space. So at this seminar, there was every different age group you could think of. There were kids in elementary school and there were people that were retired. And so again, you were getting an extremely diverse group of people together to kind of learn from one person about how he does jiu-jitsu and how he trains jiu-jitsu and how he teaches jiu-jitsu, and everyone kind of pulling what they can from that, which again was to me super interesting because at a couple different points, he had his own students showing moves. And one of them specifically was, I think, if I'm remembering correctly, he was like a 6th grader or a 5th grader, very young. But you had a scenario where you were having a 5th grade, a very young kid teaching retired adults how to do a move. And the adults are paying attention, very close attention. And I think that is in itself another, extremely unique environment that's very diverse. It's not something you would see normally. And so that was just kind of like another observation of the diversity of jiu-jitsu. When I was conducting the research as far as what studies have been done into jiu-jitsu, there's not a lot. And I think part of that's due to just the lack of popularity. I think it being only popular or becoming more popular in the past 10 to 15 years, there's not a lot of studies that have been done on it. But I was able to find 2 studies specifically that were done by an undergraduate PhD student in psychology from Sweden. His 2 studies that he did were on mental health, jiu-jitsu as a way of kind of like mental health therapy, and then what training jiu-jitsu and MMA's effect on youth was. So kind of this was more for age 15 to 24-year-olds and how it affected them. For the jiu-jitsu as mental therapy, the ultimate conclusion was that there needs to be more research done. And I think that's probably going to be the case for quite a while, because just the amount of diversity in the environments, you know, that Sweden has in jiu-jitsu vice America is going to be completely different in and of itself. But when you are training with someone who's a CEO, on some level socially, this person might be seen as above you, but on the mats, they're the same as you. And I think that helps a little bit. And that was something that he kind of came to the conclusion of. And then furthermore, jiu-jitsu is, as much as it is about hurting each other, it's also about being safe. When you're rolling with someone and you're training and sparring together, the way to stop the sparring at any point is to tap out, which is, you know, a term that kind of gets tossed around, but that's kind of just saying like, hey, like, you got me, please don't break my arm, or please don't put me to sleep. And it's kind of a sacred rule in the jiu-jitsu community. If someone taps out, that's it. It's over. And that's a very unanimous thing. And because of that, you can train extremely hard. You can go as hard as you want on someone, and as soon as they tap, you know, that's it. It's over. And with that in mind, I think that learning to do something and then being able to put that into practice right after you learned how to do it, without holding back, I think that does a lot for people's mental health. That's purely my own kind of conjecture on the observations that he made, but something that I thought kind of like played a little bit of a part in that. And I think that was a little bit substantiated by his research into the children, or the developing youths that were training jiu-jitsu and martial arts, or mixed martial arts. The conclusions for that study were more that there was significantly less levels of aggression for people that train jiu-jitsu versus people that explicitly train mixed martial arts. Again, he came to the same conclusion that there's more studies that need to be done. But either way, I think that was very interesting that those were the conclusions that were come to. And kind of just the last thing I wanted to say about this is there's kind of like a lot of fake it till you make it, or not who you know, but what you know, that's tossed around a lot these days. And I think that I think that contributes to a lack of equality or inequality, because you're saying it's not about like who you are as a human being, but what you can make seem you are about, I guess, if that makes sense, or who you know who can maybe work something for you. I think in physically active environments like jiu-jitsu or Olympic or powerlifting, I think these foster environments that are inequality cannot exist in. The only level of inequality there in those environments is it's just the amount of work that you put into it. So if I've been training for 5 years and you've been training for 1 year, there's going to be that inequality there, but that has nothing to do with where I came from or who I am as a person, what I've done in the past or what I've done in the future. And I think there's something beautiful about that. I think that there's a lot of inequality in the world right now. And I think that honestly, I don't know how to address that, but I know that I enjoy being a part of a community that seems to have as little of that as possible. And I think that fostering those kind of communities is a way to move forward in ways that do not, that kind of foster that lack of inequality. And yeah, that was my ethnographic topic. Thank you.
Thank you, John. All right, Madison.
No, I think that was a wrap. No, I'm just kidding. So I did my study on my work, which is Dee Dee's Discounts. It's a lesser known store, a lesser known sister store to Ross. It's targeted for people who need like the extra bargain that Ross doesn't necessarily provide. It's also for families. It's aimed for more diverse groups of people. I'm going to be honest, I really came into this with a negative bias. I don't like my job. Whenever I think of my job, I think of a 6-hour work shift where I'm dealing with people who are absolutely rude to me, and I literally just bagged your clothes. Like it wasn't a positive experience, but part of me was like, maybe if I can look at this from an outside perspective, I'm going to see something that's going to change my mind about that. And maybe it'll help me become a better worker here and in the future when I'm dealing with people in a workplace who maybe aren't the kindest and just understanding my store a little more in general. The first day was kind of, again, just a whole explosion of negative thoughts. I saw everything that could be wrong. A lot of it was that the store looked really lazy. If you've ever been to a Ross, especially in a really crowded neighborhood, they're a mess. There's clothes nearly everywhere. There's random things all over the place. And half of the time, it's not even really just the customer's fault. Sometimes our staff just doesn't want to pick it up, or we display things in a really awkward way. My store has a candy section for like quick grabs when you're waiting in line, and we want you to stare at that chocolate bar and think, I need that right now. And we had put like electronic items in the same section, and in my mind I was like, how does that work as an impulse buy? That doesn't make sense to me. It just seemed like things were being put there because something needed to be put there. And again, just a lot of random items everywhere. I remember like food in like the clothing section and like clothes in the shoe section. It was a whole mess. And that was really just the first day. But the second time around, I decided that I'd start focusing more on the people that came in, our customers and things like that. And so I just wanted to give some descriptions of like the kinds of people that I met, or not met, but observed coming in. So I remember that there was a mom and daughter in line, and the daughter's about 5 years old, and she's just crying like someone just hit her. She's running around, and the mom is just trying to stay calm. She's telling her, we're gonna get out soon. And while they're checking out, she's going into the candy line and she's just throwing things in their cart. The mom's trying to check out as fast as possible. And I can tell that both parties are really frustrated. Another example was, I remember a female customer with a full face of tattoos, which was really intimidating. There were lots of people who, there were lots of workers from all different kinds of jobs. There were people who were coming in from the medical field to buy scrubs because our scrubs are really cheap, or construction workers coming in to buy boots or gloves. I remember there was a Filipino family, and this is kind of a bias because I am Filipino, and this might not be relatable to a lot of people, but they were buying suitcases that were like obviously too big for overhead, and it was definitely something that was going to be checked in. And I knew that they were buying it because they were going to be sending things home. That's what you do. I mean, when you move here to the States, you buy a big box or a big luggage and you pack it up with snacks and clothes for the kids, whether it's your family or the neighborhood you're from, and you send it back. And I just thought that was really beautiful. There was another mom and daughter who were speaking only Spanish to each other. The daughter kept pulling out things from the aisle and saying, "Ma, look," in Spanish, and it was so cute. In general, there were a lot of families. There were a lot of people who you could tell were workers. There were also some high school kids across the street just socializing and shopping and having fun. And it made me think of when I was in high school and I used to do that. And I thought that was really nice. Overall, just a really diverse group of people from all walks of life, going through all kinds of different things and shopping for all kinds of different items. One thing that I didn't mention was our diversity as a staff, which is something Miss Smith had told me I should add. We actually are a really, really diverse staff as well. Again, I'm Filipino. I speak Tagalog, English, and Spanish to my customers. They love that because it makes them feel more comfortable that there's someone who can speak in a language that makes them feel more comfortable. I have a coworker who moved here from China. She hardly speaks English, but she's so good at what she does. I have a manager who barely speaks English and only speaks Spanish to me. And she does an amazing job at running the store when no one else is around. And I just think it's great that I work in a place where there's so many different kinds of people. And I don't think it was something that I'd noticed before this project. And I'm going to dig in further into that later. But another big thing that came into play was customer service. Again, I deal with a lot of different kinds of people, which is good and bad. So I actually have an example here of some interactions I noticed with a coworker, Anna. She's a mother of 3, and she works, I think, full-time here, and she's really great. She's a great person. The first interaction she had was with an elderly Hispanic lady, and I remember them laughing and talking and just taking time, and they were speaking in full-on Spanish, and I could just tell that they really, really enjoyed each other's company. On the opposite end of the spectrum, within the same hour, she had gotten into an argument with another customer who had left his items in a random place. And of course, her job is to pick up things that don't belong there. And I guess there was a misunderstanding, and he said, I'm buying those things. I don't know why you're touching them, even though he was very far from his items. But I remember her coming up to me and ranting to me about it. And it obviously made her really upset, because at the end of the day, she was really just doing her job. And she didn't know that he was buying those things. And from that, it was kind of just like where do we as customers feel that it's like to what extent do we feel it's okay to be rude to our workers or our staff? It's, sorry, I'm getting a little sweaty. It was more of like, I couldn't understand where people found it okay to be that way to other people. So after some further research, I looked into kind of like customer service as well. And I remember an article on Black Friday about how customers were already really upset. They couldn't find certain things or what have you, and they used their cashiers as punching bags. And, they would blame them for things that were totally out of their control. And it was a lot of cashiers were just like, we don't understand why, and it makes our job so much harder to do. How are we going to have the motivation to want to make this store nice for you if we are not being treated correctly? But in the same light, I also found that when a store isn't necessarily in order or isn't as presentable as it should be, customers are obviously not going to give it that same respect. I mean, I'm sure that some of you have gone into like a store that was pretty messy and thought, well, what is it going to hurt if I leave this item here? It's already a mess. And that's when I found that like the psychology of retail is really important in how a store is run. In order for everything to really function, I just feel like people need to be kinder to each other, whether it's staff or whether you're a customer. And, at the end of the day, like, people just need to learn to be kinder to each other and be more mindful. The second theme that I pulled out was that chain stores can actually be a really good place for communities to come together. Like I said, I met every kind of walk of life there, doing whatever it was they're doing, whether they were buying for their work or they were buying for pleasure. And I feel like, with that being said, that if we can start realizing that places like this have so much opportunity to bring people together for like small reasons, that we can make them even better as a community by being kinder to each other and just, recognizing those things. And yeah, that's really what I found through these notes. And I feel a lot happier about where I work now. And I'm kind of proud of the place that I'm at. So yeah, thank you all for listening to my rant.
It's not a rant, it's your research. Maybe it feels like a rant, but I have a pre Q&A part question or just something to add. One thing I thought was really interesting about your observations, Madison, is that at what's it called again? DD's. DD's, right? Okay. If I buy something, I can round up, right? And that money will go to the local school to buy books. Is that correct?
Yeah, so every once in a while, we will have a donation time where we ask customers to either round up or you can donate however much you'd like to Fair, I think it's called Fairchild Books, but I forget. It's basically a program where we give back to a local school, which actually is walking distance from the store, and it's an elementary school, and a lot of our customers kids actually go there, so it's nice because they're giving directly back to their own children and children in the community. So yeah,
I was
that's
surprised because I'd never seen that before. You know, a lot of stores ask you if you want to round up for, some large kind of faceless nonprofit, right? And unless you have a like a real connection to it,
yeah, you're not really getting.
you're not moved to donate any money to it. And sometimes it seems, and I've heard people talk about this online, like you're just helping to offset their taxes by doing that, because then it'll seem like they donated money. I don't know.
No,
Uh,
yeah, totally.
but I love the idea that, people at DD's can help kids have more books. And like you said, it's their own children, their own family members, their own neighbors. It goes right back into the immediate community.
Yeah, totally. Thank you for adding that.
Sure, sure. We'd like to open up for Q&A now. Do any of our guests have questions for our student researchers? I think we have one in the chat from Sarah. I was going to ask Madison if the project has made her change her mind about her job. It is great to hear that it gave her a different perspective and a newfound love of her job. Oh, I think you're muted.
All right.
That's all right.
So yeah, like I mentioned, it did kind of change how I saw my job. And actually after a few days of just taking the field notes, I was like, wait, like this is kind of nice. And what I do is small, but it's good. And even like I said, just being able to speak a language to my customers that is comfortable for them. I mean, they look at me and they're like, wait, you speak this? And I'm like, yeah, I can help you out, whatever you need. And it's just, I watched their body just change, their what is it called? Body language. It rests. And it's so nice to be able to do that for people.
That's such a cool thing to realize, because that is really a gift, to be able to, make someone feel at ease because you speak their home language.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I always get it with like Spanish speakers because I obviously don't look like someone who would speak Spanish. I actually had a customer a couple days ago tell me, that's so great. My kids don't even speak Spanish and we're Mexican. Like, I'm so proud of you. And I was like, thank you. That's so nice.
We do have a comment in the chat from Professor Pega Motalib. I don't have a question, but to all the students who presented, I'm incredibly moved by the amount of work, observations, and effort you brought into this project. Thank you, Pega.
Thank you. Thank you.
I am too. It seemed like you chose something that was maybe close to you and maybe kind of easy, but that you had, once you had studied it, you kind of surprised yourself. I think that's what I'm hearing from students pretty routinely, that they didn't really see it until they, looked at their fish. Until they had to, and I think you said that too, Sarah, that once you sat down and were taking notes, you saw it differently. And I even wonder if it's the physical act itself. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think so. I think it really helped when I had to write it down. It really opened my eyes to so much more than what I never would have thought. So I think that really did help.
That's great. Madison, were you going to add something? Oh, muted.
I just wanted to tell Lawrence that I actually really appreciate that you decided to not do it on your detainees. I feel like that was really respectful of their privacy. And as much as that would have been really interesting and juicy, I think that was a smarter move. And I am actually surprised on how interesting it was. No offense, just because like, you know, you would never think of that. And I don't know, I thought it was really cool. So thank you.
Thanks, Madison. Lawrence, I'm really interested in the ethnography of gossip now. I did a
I know,
quick
right?
search on it, and I think I think you have a new career ahead.
Yeah, no, honestly, like I said, like I knew like my office was gossipy, but like what place isn't, you know what I mean? But once I actually started like once I finished my paper and I put it down into words, it just definitely makes more sense why it's so prevalent, why it has such consequences and stuff like that. And it made me think about it in a different light, in a more empathetic light too, because before I was like, well, these people are just chatty Cathys, you know, but now I'm like, no, they're doing this because they're trying to understand, they're trying to make their environment as safe for them as they can. You know what I mean? And that's something I can respect and understand. So I'm not as judgmental towards my coworkers anymore.
Yeah, it seemed like it was their way of coping.
Yeah, I'd say so.
Yeah, it was fun to be in on the gossip in the field notes.
Maybe even gossiping kind of helps them. Well, I think you already mentioned this, but just allows them to get out what they felt for the day. Like, I'm sure your job is not easy and you have to be real patient with people. So, you know, maybe part of that's also just them being able to release it in a way.
Mhm.
So yeah, absolutely. And that kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier. Like, yes, gossip serves a function as finding out who's safe and who's not, who's trustworthy and who's not, right? But it also can just be gossip. It could just be just people talking by the water cooler too, or venting their frustrations. Because, like I said, big correctional officer culture is big, but mine was in group versus out group in the context of gossip. And yeah, so you're absolutely right. It serves multiple functions.
Does anyone have questions or comments for Sarah or Jonathan as well? I have a question, and you two, I would like to begin it. We only have a couple of minutes, but I'm wondering, you two can start, maybe everyone can talk, but I wondered how this assignment affected the way you see your relationship with writing and whether it has changed your writing, because you know, it is primarily a writing class.
For me personally, I've always struggled with writing. I didn't feel like I could get what I was trying to say out. I feel like I can talk about it better than what I can write it. I was completely amazed at when I finished the paper at what I was able to accomplish. And it actually made, I think picking the assignment that I had fun doing the research for, it made it fun writing. And I was excited to write it. I would get distracted plenty of times with everything else going on, but I had so much fun writing. So I loved it.
That's great to hear. Jonathan, what are
Yeah,
your thoughts?
yeah, I agree with Sarah. I think it was most of us have done research reports on like history or a book from high school or something like that. But this is definitely the first time I've ever done a report on like my own observations, and I guess kind of giving credit to my observations, if that makes sense. So whereas usually I'll observe something and I won't think twice about it, here it's like, no, you have to think about this and kind of assess it from um, outside of your bias, which is not an easy thing for me to do. That's for me specifically, that was super hard. So
Thank you. Well, it looks like we're out of time. I would love to just sit and talk about writing, but maybe another time. Thank you so much, my students, for taking the time to be here. I know that you all work, and so I'm doubly, triply thankful that you took the time to out of your work days to come and talk with some of us. Thank you everyone who came, and thank you, Caitlin. Thank you. Sorry, I had kind of a speech, and then I was just talking randomly about gratefulness, but I did want to say that these students are brave and dedicated scholars who definitely looked at their fish, and you've shown me and others, as we see again and again, how much we can learn from students. And I really, really wanted to say that part. So thank you again, and everyone have a great rest of your day.